Today we're doing our first tier maker. I want to do this for some time now, and I hadn't gotten a chance to do it until recently. So I figured, you know what? Why not do it now? I feel like it's the right angle to tackle it now. Um, and we're going to start with tarot cards or tarot whisperers. And I think in general, we're just going to start from, left to right here for some more context. I generally do end up finishing most endgame content. The caveat being I stop when it comes to reaching the Luxite caps. For example, say there's an event and the event even has like a leaderboard to it or something. When the Luxite cap is hit, most of the times you probably won't even be high in the leaderboards, but you can do more parts of the event so you get higher in leaderboards, but you just don't get any more Luxite, right? You sort of you don't have any more to gain from the event. And that's kind of where I land. And this is also true for things like Clash. I'll hit I think Radiance 1 is the cap for Clash, and then we don't do too much anywhere after that. That means we get most of the rewards, but we don't really get any higher than Radiance, just because I think my time is better else spent somewhere else. And this is for most endgame content. So I think we've done for Tower Adversity floor 7, and we stop there. And after that, I think we generally are in the lower 50% percentile when it comes to people who have finished floor 7. So that's generally where we are, and that's just sort of give you an understanding of where I am when it comes to ranking these, I guess, how you want to take it in regards to taking grain of salt or not. Okay, so the tier list also is going to be based on usability of these tarot cards. For example, tier 0 I would spec as tarots that are generally good that you can use in most content, and tier D or tier 3 is stuff that's not good, stuff that you probably don't want to ever use. And then of course anywhere in between is situational or niche, or just perhaps you'll only play it on 1 or 2 units. So we'll leave it at that, and we'll start going through this because there are actually quite a lot. I think there's 18 tarots to get through, but so let's go over them. The first one is Hierophant's Laws. So AoE damage taken is decreased by 20%. When attacking a single target, damage increases by 20%. When healing a single target, the healing amount increases by 20%. In my opinion, this one is very much a niche-specific tarot. I think it can be strong when it comes to single-player content that requires you to fight one single boss that takes up 9 tiles. I don't know how large the calamities usually are. But I think most of the time when you are fighting these calamities and the Fool's Journey or your dailies, they'll be a whole 9 tiles, and on top of that, I think a lot of the damage that they do is AoE. So this kind of gets into a position where you're taking the best of both worlds, and that you're reducing the damage they're doing by 20% effectively. Most of their damage is not, I don't say most of them, but a lot of these bosses that are you want to spec this onto your units for are going to be doing 20% less damage. It's quite strong. I think when it comes to damage reduction, this is the higher rungs of damage reduction that you get from these tarot cards or tarot whispers. And so yeah, this is particularly strong. And then when it comes to single target attacks, you're doing increased damage. Mind you, I think a lot of these bosses do spawn some minions or summon something here and there. That's something to keep in track of or keep note of. But outside of that, when you're doing single target damage to the bosses, you're doing an extra 20% damage, which is quite strong, right? 20% damage is that's nothing to scoff at. I think it's of course one of the higher rungs of damage to be doing when it comes to damage from these tarot cards. And the awkward part is when you do run this one is that the healing is single target. And so when you think about the fact when you want to play this, you play it in content that does require you to be playing against AoE damage, usually you want AoE heals. And so it's quite weird to have the AoE, the single target healing increased and not just healing increased in general. And so that's quite weird as well. But in general, I think this is quite niche, and that you definitely need this for bosses, but outside of bosses, I feel AoE damage isn't too common. I wish it was, just because it does require you to use a larger variety of tarots, but I just don't think it is that common yet. And so we're definitely putting it in tier 2 for now. The Fool's Naivety. So HP is increased by 10% when initiating an active attack if the character's max HP is greater than 10%. Damage dealt is additionally increased by 10%. And of course, this is duplicated for the last special as well. The last slot as well. So it could be an additional 20% HP on top of an additional 20% damage. This is quite strong. Of course, this does require you to have a unit that is quite tanky For units that are quite tanky, I would list them as probably amongst the stronger of the defenders, such as like I think Coco, Mytha, even like Sentry can probably use some amount of this. I think units that also scale off of HP are super effective, so units that do healing based on that. So I think like Coco is definitely one of them, where I think she has in her decision skill, she has a skill that gives health based on the caster's HP. And so if the caster has like 10,000 HP, healing by like 5,000, I don't know, healing by like an increased amount based on like your tarot is like super strong. I want to say that I'll take that back when I said 10,000. But like just the fact that you can scales the healing is actually quite strong for these tanks. I've actually ended up starting rolling this on Mytha, but outside of that, I don't think it's quite good on these other units. So in that case, I'm going to be putting it in niche, but I do think it is strong on some of the tankier units. Next up is Source of Strength. When attacked by a character of the counter roll, damage taken is decreased by 10%. When attacking a character of the character's counter roll, ignores 15% of the target's defense. Additionally, it does the same for the last special slot, but this is an additional 10% when it comes to taking damage from the counter roll, and ignores an additional 20% when attacking the counter roll. I will say this is also quite niche. I feel like when this comes to single player content, you have the ability to know when to counter someone. So you're already doing a significant damage, right? You don't really need this. Generally, like you're already, I want to say one-shotting units. This is not needed, I feel like, ever. One time it can be quite strong if you're doing like some weird, maybe like common or like uncommon run where like you really just need ways to kill units off, particularly because like the extra 20% damage, damage reduction on top of the 35% damage ignorance I don't know how to say this. It's just like decent. It's not that bad at all, but it's just so niche because it does require you to sort of understand the stage, and like you can always tech against this without needing to switch your tarots. So I think this is like just generally not good. But if there are cases where like you guys do think this is good, let me know, because this is like one of those cases where I think you honestly just can adapt to the stage by like picking a different by picking like a different unit or role for that stage, because we do have like understanding of like what is being played on that stage before actually doing the stage. There are some games that don't have this sort of thing. Like you could think of like, I think Final Fantasy Tactics, where like you don't see the stage until, actually no, I think you can actually. I think you can. Like we have this information beforehand. There's no need to tech this much, in my opinion, but it might be good still. Yep. Dream of the Magician increases damage dealt by 8%. When casting skills for each additional hit on one enemy, the damage dealt increases by 4% up to 12%. And the last slot changes the Whisper skill into increases damage dealt by 16%. When casting a skill for each additional hit on one enemy, damage dealt increases by 8% up to 24%. Honestly, this is actually quite strong. I think one of the stronger tarots, where most of the content, in my opinion, in this game has, I think, turned into being like mass AoE damage dealers needing to deal the damage. And that like units like Marcel or like Luvada or Kvare, like all these units are doing like AoE damage, tons of AoE damage, and the fact that like you can get an increase in like 40% damage dealt is like super significant. Like that is wild. On top of that, it's like a flat 16%. Like we saw like other effects do less. The fact that this is increased like 40% potentially is like insane for like not much, right? Like it doesn't take that much work for you to hit that many units, and for hitting that many units, that's how you get the benefit, right? It's like you're getting benefited for doing the thing you want to do anyways. Yeah, this is actually insane. I think this is tier 0. I could see some cases where like you'd put it in tier 1 for like, maybe you could say for like boss fights or something like that. Other than that, it's like even for boss fights, if they are summoning like other units or minions or something for these boss fights, you can generally adjust the targeting such that like you can end up nickel and diming the bosses when you have to hit the like smaller units. So I think it's a lot. I think it's a lot of damage here. So we're gonna put it in tier 0, but also I can see a situation where like you put it in tier 1. Next up is Majesty of the Emperor. So this increases damage at 10% when attacking healthy enemies, and for the last slot, increases damage dealt by another additional 15% when attacking healthy enemies. In my opinion, this is like quite weak. I think it could be strong when it comes to wanting to one-shot units, but in that case, I do think there are other times you could pick like better Taros, or Taros that just generally work better for most of the map, or most of the, I guess, yeah, most of the game. And that like the fact that this turns off after they're not healthy, which is like the 70% mark, 70% health left, is like quite weird, because in general, I feel like if you're going to get the super hard endgame content, you're oftentimes not one-shotting units. And so not being able to have a Taro basically because it turns off after healthy is quite weak. But I can see like why you might want to use this. For example, if you do need to one-shot units, like the content is such that it's possible, okay, I can understand that. But I do think you do miss out on some points here and there, just because having to have units healthy means you can't even spread AoE damage sometimes, because that might get them below the healthy mark, right? And if you're not doing AoE damage a lot, those games are taking forever, right? Like some of these maps have like 10 to 20-ish units. It's gonna take forever. So yeah, not my favorite. So we're definitely going to put it in niche. Verdict of Justice increases crit chance by 15%, and then increases crit damage by 15%. So this was one I had a debate about. I had to really think about this. When it comes to units that want Verdict of Justice, I think in general they're probably going to be high crit units anyways, and so you can kind of just think of this as an additional 30% damage, because I think crit chance multiplier is 30% in this game, and so this is just a flat 30% damage increase. Is that strong? I think so, right? I think if you think of Whisperers, Taros, like the last one that we saw, or the ones 2 before, Dream of the Magician, this is giving you 40%. Like imagine Verdict of Justice giving you flat 30% on top of another 15% of that damage to like 45%. So this is like similar, except it's kind of requiring you to build up a little bit more crit, but after you hit the crit cap, you're always hitting that extra 30% on top of the additional 15%. This is basically acting like a functional equivalent to Dream of the Magician. If you do like this napkin math, I don't know how it scales actually. I'm assuming it's kind of not linear, but like exponential in that case, where like if you are dealing additional attack damage, if you have an increased attack damage, that crit damage is going to be based on that increased attack damage. And so having like a few buffs here and there will also increase this significantly, which might even just like make this on par when it comes to single target damage with like the Dream of the Magician. Actually, probably even better, right? This is like 16%. And I guess if you're doing an additional, like for each target hit, it's like 8% here. So Dream of the Magician is doing at minimum like 24%, where like this is doing 30%, assuming you do have the crit chance. I think it's quite strong. It could be quite bad, I would say, if you don't have the crit chance for it. I want to say you should think about it in a vacuum, because I think most times when you are playing it, you're playing it with units that do have high crit chance anyways, like Seekers, or like people like Nungle, right? Nungle has increased crit chance on a lot of her abilities, so having this on Nungle basically guarantees you to have the crit chance. And I think some of her abilities also increase the damage that you do as well once you do get a crit. I think I'm gonna be based on like the Hangman's Mark. So I want to say this is like situationally good, but it's also like quite close to tier 0 if you do play it in rules where like they can get guaranteed crit. Now I think a lot of units also just give crit chance, and so if you get like crit up 1 or crit up 2, like this could very easily sort of lean into tier 0, where like if you have like AoE damage dealers that just like do a bunch of like AoE damage, but you decide to like put a Verdict of Justice on them, like it can kind of just like look very similar to Dream of the Magician, right? So like if you have like Luvada, who already has like a super high crit chance, and you like increase her crit damage an additional 15%, this can like teeter towards tier 0 in my opinion. But the fact that you do need a lot of crit chance means you're kind of like swinging a certain way, right? Like you definitely are pointing your direction in that like you do need this to have on a unit that does have crit chance. So we're gonna put it on tier 1, but I think it's like close to tier 0. Silence of the Hermit. Damage decreases by 10%, and initially decreases by another 10% once you hit the special slot. I would say this is generally good. I would say it's situationally good. You probably want this on like your defenders, or like for content that is like quite hard. This also is good in the fact that like if there are fights that are sort of a hodgepodge of AoE or single target or like ranged, this blocks all damage taken. So like the flat 20% does cover sort of all your damage types. I think it's like quite strong. It's not like cool or interesting, and that doesn't do too much. It's just like a flat 20% damage reduction. I think it's strong. I think it's like generally strong. I think for me, this has been super strong. And when it comes to cases where you need to fight like a boss and you're just like not sure how to attack against it. And so just like having this as like your damage reduction, and then you can just like spec it such that like the other slots are like damage increases for like your damage dealers, super strong. Or you can also like tech this such that the other slots are like defensive stats, and this becomes like a super strong tank tarot. So we're gonna put it in situationally good, but also it might be generally good. Yeah, I've not decided on that really. Next up is Mercy of the High Priestess. This is increasing healing effect by 15%. Also increases healing by an additional 15% for the special slot, and when you're in dying state, it increases by additional 15%, so 45% total. In my opinion, it's okay. I personally don't trend towards this whenever I want to go for like a healer. I think they generally heal enough because a lot of like you get a lot of attack damage or attack based on like random stats from like your weapons and stuff like this. And so I generally find myself like topping off regardless of like needing to do too much. Like I think most healers just have stuff in their kit that like they'll just randomly heal you, right? So additional healing is like not necessary. Also, like I don't think health is that much of an abundance in this game where like the ratio of your healing being based off of your actual attributes will most time get you to the cap of someone's health. So yeah, I think this is like okay to have, or it's cool to have maybe, or cute in some occasions where like maybe you're taking a bunch of AoE damage and you just need your healer to be doing a bunch of healing. But other than that, it's like quite niche, and that I don't think is probably your go-to for most healing. Like you're probably healing up to full regardless of this, in my opinion. So like I'm gonna put it in niche. The next up I think is one that I think is actually a little bit better. This is Elegance of the Empress. So after casting a skill, an ally converts one debuff on the target into one level 1 buff, and that's for 2 turns. And this gets you additional 1 for the last slot as well. In my opinion, I think Elegance of the Empress shines best on healers, where like I think generally they do have some ways of dispelling a buff or two, and so adding this on like content that is just like super debuff heavy, for example, that just has like some life loss, literally every sort of attack gives life loss, this can be super strong. Not only does it function as a dispel, it also functions as like an additional buff to the target. And so any subsequent like follow-ups, if you like roll for a defense up, just like reduces the damage taken, right? So it makes your, I guess, healing or utility spells, if you guys want to count healing as utility, a little more sticky, and that like the permanence of it is a little longer. It like lasts a little longer. Subsequent attacks don't do as much damage, so you don't need to heal as much. I think this is generally a little better because also it does provide even like stat increases for like your attack, right? So like yeah, I think this is like super strong in that case. And I would generally put this as niche specific, just because outside of like being a dedicated healer, you probably don't want to put this on like a tank or anything, like a Coco or Mytha. But like if you are playing this on like a perhaps healer, like this becomes like super strong. I would keep this on like tier 1 to tier 2 in my opinion. Next up is Redemption of Judgment. At the end of turn, dispels 2 attribute buffs from one random enemy within 2 tiles on the character, and then dispels 2 from one random enemy around 2 tiles of the character on the special slot. Also inflicts Judgment. I think Judgment increases the damage you're dealt to the unit. I think by like 10%. I could be wrong here, but I think it's by 10%. I think this is okay. Probably not the strongest in my opinion. I think it is one of the only tarots that do dispel off of units around the enemy. I would honestly put this in niche as well. I think I use this particularly when it came to tarot residuals, where like you need to debuff. I think the boss or one of the boss's like units that it spawns. I forget exactly what, but like it could be useful there. Outside of that, I think this could also be useful when it comes to some endgame content or events where like you just need to dispel enough buffs and you don't have enough like healers to start dispelling everything, and so or like you don't have any units that dispels it quite a lot. I think most times you'll be dispelling off of enemy units is when it comes to like special attacks like from Kvare, or like yeah, abilities that like dispel attacks, or like I think Anana is also one, a new SP Anana ability dispels like 5 buffs, stuff like this. But like other than that, if you don't have enough of those sort of effects, or you don't have those units, this is kind of your go-to. But you definitely do need to take advantage of like this by like leaning on that judgment, in my opinion. But yeah, I would put this in like tier 2. It's like okay. I would definitely play it in like special events when it comes to like bosses. I think it comes particularly strong. Next up is Temptation of the Devil. For each one character defeated in the battle, gains 1 stack of Devil. This effect lasts until the end of the battle and cannot be dispelled or immunized. I think Devil increases the damage dealt and defense by 3%. I think this is, generally good. I think most of the, and of course I'm biased, I play literally Devil in like all my units. Most of the maps have like tons of units, and if you can get the 2 stacks per kill on the Devil, it just becomes even better in this PvE content, where like I think there's generally enough units on the battlefield that like hitting 15, I think is it 15 or is it 10? I think it's 10. 10 stacks of Devil is like quite trivial. If you're also playing summoners like a Kambe, which I do a lot, this also becomes super easy. I think this is good. And of course, if you're playing like, I want to say everything except for PvE or PvP, this is like quite strong, because I think there's in general enough units that will be spawned for like bosses. They'll spawn units, but if it's not bosses, you'll just get stronger over the course of the game. This will make your units quite strong, and like 30% increased attack and 30% increased defense. Honestly, it's up there with like things like Dream of the Magician, right? Dream of the Magician is giving you 40% damage. This is giving you 30% damage plus 30% defense. And it's like quite strong, right? And it's quite agnostic to like how many things you're like targeting. It does require you some setup, but like I think other than that, I think it's generally good. You can play it in most content if you're just like, as long as you're speccing the actual attribute slots to like your needs. Guidance of the World. So this recovers 1 energy additionally when not using any active skills and on standby. And when no active skills are used and on standby, all active skills are reduced by 1 turn. This is quite niche. I want to say it's almost tier 3, but I think there are some use cases when it comes to using this. For example, when it comes to people like Marcel, who has like additional benefits when using standby, or stuff like Tear, who can like trigger the standby multiple times in a single round. It's like, and you want to like, I guess, really work on the Caged Reverie, it's like not that useful, right? For example, unless you're using this on like a Seeker who needs to get in the back line or something, it's quite hard to like use this super effectively. This could be also useful on like things like a Kambe where you're like spamming your summons. That could be okay. It is also one of the only ways to recover energy reliably as part of like a tarot. There's some niche cases for this, but I don't think it's good. For example, if you want to put this on a damage dealer, you don't want to take turns off. And so if you're taking turns off, you're basically not doing damage. So it's quite hard to use it for that case. So I think in most cases you want to use this for utility. And the utility cases I think are too far in between. So I'm going to put this in niche for tier 2. But I do think it does have some slots or places to play this where like it could be okay. For example, if you're using like Tear and I think you're sort of going strong on the Caged Reverie sort of ability, then it could be okay. Destruction of the Tower. When it's not the character's turn, damage dealt increases by 20%. While it's not the character's turn, gains 40% lifesteal and dealing damage when dealing damage. I think this is niche as well. I think this is good on alert teams. For example, someone like Layla or Pamina, all stuff like this that gives you alert. I think it could be strong there. Damage dealt increased by 20% is like strong. The fact that you do need life, that this gives lifesteal, it sort of pushes it more into like a tanky slash fightery kind of role where like you have to be able to take damage and deal damage, right? So yeah, it's probably super niche, right? You do need to have alert. You do want to be a little more tanky, and I guess all sort of tankier units have the alert units can be kind of tanky. I think most alert units can be kind of tanky. Like outside of that, it's like you're probably going to be healthy. Like for example, if you play like alert Fatal, like are you oftentimes using lifesteal? Like how often are you taking damage, right? If you're playing that close up with Fatal, maybe unless it's like AoE Bonanza map, like maybe lifesteal becomes quite bad, but like outside of that, it's like you're probably not using lifesteal that much and you're just using it for its increased damage. I think maybe it also might be worth considering when you're playing. Who else would you be playing? anyone who does like outside of turn damage is like probably gonna be tankier for this. Yeah, I think it's quite niche, but I think there's some cases where you want to play this. Like maybe that one Hamina? Is it Hamina? Homa? Okay, Homa. Maybe Homa might use this. Like I don't know how she would work for this, but yeah, this is like quite niche for sure. Next up is Course of Fortune. At the start of turn, gains 1 random buff of the Wheel of Fortune. At the start of turn, gains additional 1 random buff from the Wheel of Fortune. And the Wheel of Fortune has multiple buffs. For example, here are the buffs from Wheel of Fortune. So you could potentially not gain anything, but also if you do gain something, I think it requires you at least 6 cycles to at least hit one of these once in a game. For example, the second turn that you trigger the Wheel of Fortune, you've gone through at least 4 of these. And they're actually quite strong in my opinion, at least when you use them together. For example, there's a heal here, heal all allies equal to your magic attack plus your physical attack. So it might be useful for supports here. Also increases your attack and defense by 8% and restores 1 energy at the end of turn. Also a way to unreliably gain energy. Additionally, it can deal piercing damage and also increase damage dealt by 10%. Also has a buff to reduce damage taken. It also just blank, right? If it blanks, it's quite bad. But if you kind of think about this when you're triggering all these abilities, if you can trigger all at once, this is definitely like worth it in my opinion. There's a lot of stuff happening here. Just the fact that you get all these sort of utility abilities and like skills and things happening is just like so strong and beneficial in my opinion. But I think it mostly does generally trend to being like unreliable. And so if you really want to use this, you have to sort of like not think about it too hard because otherwise I think there are reliable ways to like getting any sort of effect you want otherwise. For example, if you're like playing a boss, you don't want to sort of bank on hitting the one that reduces damage taken and the one that like increases your attack and defense. But if you are sort of a backline healer or like utility unit, banking for that extra like energy gain or the extra heal in your backline, it could be okay because like honestly you probably have time to reliably like wait for that proc to trigger, and also all these other abilities can also work pretty effectively for like those backline units. So in that case, I'm gonna put it in situationally good. Next up is Desire of Temperance. At the start of battle, gains a physical shield equal to 25% of the character's physical attack plus magical attack. The shield cannot be dispelled. When you have a shield, decrease damage taken by 15%. Yeah, unless you have like a super high roll Desire of Temperance, you're probably not gonna use this too much. You can also, this could be like a little bit better on units that do have shields or can spawn like physical shields. For example, anyone like you can spawn physical shields. If you do have Shield of Justice, this is something that can be super helpful. If you do have Tiden, this could be like decently strong. Anyone in their kit that can like gain physical shield can be quite strong, because you can like, if you can keep generating these physical shields, having like a flat 15% increased damage is like quite good. But also extra 25% health based on your physical attack and magic attack is going to be good. But generally, if you do put this on a unit, it's probably not going to have high physical or magic attack, right? So maybe if you use this as like a way to deal damage, if you do this on put this on damage dealer, maybe only then they'll have like a high shield. But like it's only temporary, like they're not like respawning and like creating an additional like it basically it'll die out, right? The opportunity cost is like it's gonna be like dying once you take a few hits here and there. So I think this is like quite niche. I would put it in probably tier 3, maybe tier 2, just because after you bust that shield, the odds of you creating a new one are probably gonna be super low. So we're gonna put it there. Next one is Gibbous Moon. At the end of turn, recovers 20% HP if the character is injured. And then the next slot, when the character is injured, healing received increases by 50% and further increases by 30% when dying state. I've never really tested this, but like if the healing is increased by an additional, by the Gibbous Moon plus like any additional sources, I think this is like quite strong. For example, this might be even stronger for tanks. For example, I think they might even be able to heal past injured. When they've had the additional healing from this and in dying. But of course, this is also based on your HP. So I think this could be strong for tanky units, but outside of that, probably not that good. We're going to put it in niche. Next one is Rays of the Sun. When attacking injured enemies, ignores 20% of their defense. And when attacking injured enemies, additionally ignores 20% of their defense. unless you're playing against like high defense units, this is probably not going to be that strong. For example, I think this game generally tends to have units with more health than more defense. But also we have a lot of ways to lower the defense. I think this doesn't account for like the defense lowering, right? So it doesn't apply before defense down debuffs. This is applied after that. So I think this could be like decently strong, but I just don't think it's as strong as you might think it out in your mind. Just I think health is like generally more king in this game. So we're gonna put this as probably like not good at all. Yeah, unless you're going like super high on like one sort of defense, like the content you're playing. But like even then, it's kind of risky because if you know you're playing against like physically defensive units, you can just play magical attack units, right? And that can be said for like the devs too, right? Like we're really playing against the devs, and the devs understand that like the units that they're going to be like spawning out on these maps are just like physically defensive. Why would they want you to play this, right? Like they can just like increase health, and that attacks against physical defense, attacks against physical attack, attacks against magic attack, and attacks against like piercing damage. So like that's just generally better than just having like a defensive stat. Yeah, we're putting it in tier 3. And then next is March of the Chariot. This gains move 1 when not using any active skills, and it changes to move 2 when not using active skills. I think, yeah, this is probably not good outside of maybe niche. So we can probably put this as like, yeah, tier 3. Maybe I'll just have like some fun content where like it requires you to sneak, like the sneaking content. It could be cool and fun with that. But outside of that, yeah, I'm probably not doing it. But I will say like those maps are quite fun, and I would definitely play those more. But like outside those maps, yeah, March of the Chariot probably not that good. All right, but that is the tier list. Let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. I'll probably link this there if you guys want to rank as well. Let me know what y'all think. I think in general, I would say, yeah, this does seem like the tier list for me. Yeah, I could be swayed though. Like some of these are definitely like on the line, the borderline between like one of these tiers. Let me know what y'all think in the comments below. Also take a chance to do this yourselves, because I'd also be interested in doing like a follow-up here if y'all have any comments on this.